Now we can take a look at materials and the various properties they have and really how to apply them to the model. First, we're going to look at some concepts before we apply them to our house, and then we'll apply them to the house. And really what I want to go over is the different ways materials can be applied. You see that we have um, some materials I brought in that we're going to use on this house. So what I have here is a material palette used from a different project, and it shows what color would be used for the body, the fascia, soffit, and so on and so forth. And really these are just pure colors, no textures, if you will, just solid colors. And here we have some textures that I want to use that have no color, and to show you that there's ways that you can kind of combine the two. Uh, the other important piece that I really want to point out with SketchUp is it's not the best program to show a representation of colors, even though this color is based off of an actual paint selection with the RGB values from the company itself. So it is an accurate color, uh, but really the way SketchUp deals with shade and shadow, really depending on how you look at it, you'll see that this color really changes from a yellow to a much more of a peach. Um, so it's really hard to really show accurate colors, especially on these lighter ones. Just keep that in mind, but it's still great to be able to apply materials and show what you want to show. Uh, the first thing we're going to look at really is how to apply materials. And so I'm going to create a couple cubes here. Uh, and I'll explain what I'm doing in 1 second. So let's see here. So what I have is a cube that is basically exploded, so you can see it has each of its individual pieces. I have a cube here that's a group, and a cube here that's a component. And these two I'm going to make copies of. Just bring them up here. So generally, I like to paint on the surface level. So this exploded cube, or coming inside of here and painting here. And there's really reasons for doing that. But there could come a time where sometimes it makes sense to just simply paint the container versus the pieces. Uh, and so you really have to decide that for yourself of when it makes sense. But I just want to show you the effects of making the choices between them. So first, let's look at uh, we'll look at the exploded version. You can see that again, hitting B for my paint bucket, the home key will bring up any materials that are within my model, and Alt key, pressing and holding Alt key will bring up a eyedropper that I can use, and you can see up here that the material changes. This is my active material, the one that will be painted. So it's a quick way to choose materials. And so you can see that I can either paint this face, and choose which face I want to paint, or I can say select these two faces, say I want this one and this one, and then if I paint this, both of these get painted. So it's whatever is selected. So if I triple click, so that means everything is selected, I can just click once and everything gets painted. Here on this group, there's what I really want to show you. There's really a couple different things that can go on while painting a group. You can either paint a group by just clicking once on the group, and it essentially paints the container. So anything with the default material will get painted that color. Now if I come into here and say select a different color, I can paint over that. So the surface most level material will override. So you see that everything else is still that the container color, but my surface color is still there. So you see, if I click here and paint the container, everything that would be the default color still gets painted. And you'll see that if I choosing my default material and painting this, you see that these two are actually still the default color within my surface model. But if I come back out here and paint, then whatever's default will get painted that color. So I can even paint it grass, and so you see what happens. So it's just important to keep in mind when and where you paint on materials and what can happen. And sometimes there's reasons you would want to do this. I've seen, let's say you have a chair on the a pool chair that has, say, stripes on it, and you know that you always want, say, one white color. You want, say, white and red, or white and blue, but you know it's always going to be white. You can just come in here, select white, and paint every other one white. And now, if I were to make a copy of this, even if it was a component, let me just make a copy and make a component. You'll see that, say, this chair I want to be red, and this chair I want to be green. You see that where I painted white stays white, and where I left as the default material changes colors. So it can really be used to your advantage if to think smart about how you apply materials. So with that said, let me just kind of back out and get rid of some of this stuff and paint this back to default. So that you can see that groups really can be painted two different ways, either painting the interior surface or painting the exterior surface. Let's grab a different color, and you'll see that if I go and paint the exterior surface, now if I try to paint the exterior of this surface, nothing happens because my surface most level pieces are painted green. So even though I keep clicking here, nothing's happening. But note that if I come back in here and choose my default color, you see that it actually paints blue. This is not technically painted blue. The surface itself, the container's painted blue. So just keep that in mind. It's just the way that the default material works. So again, if I come back here and paint the container default, you see this turns back default. So really the lesson is just look at how the surface or the container is painted. And the next piece that you'd really want to look at with this, again, I'm painting the container, so the container is painted blue, so anything default material is painted blue. But another piece to note is if I take this and I explode it, what's going to happen is the container paint will now be applied to whatever was default material. So this face that in here, if I again paint this back to default, you see that this face is a default material. This one is now blue because it applied the color to the default material. Anything that wasn't default will keep its original material, but just be aware that when you explode, the container material gets applied to default materials. Now, that's working with groups. Now, working with components, what's interesting here is, as you can imagine, let's just pick another fun color, say purple or whatever. If I come inside and I paint the surface level, as you can imagine, the surface changes on every instance because it's a component. No matter how many of these I make, you see that if I paint the face, they all change. Now, the only thing that gets applied to components is what's inside the component box. If you paint the component box itself, you see that I can paint each one of these boxes a different color because the container itself is not a component, just the pieces within the container is a component. So it's an important distinction to make. So you see, if I come back inside the container and I paint this face again, they all turn. But you can see that anything that was a default material is still painted the container material. So hopefully that makes sense. The difference between surface level or container level, and the difference between groups and components, that materials really can be affected differently for the different ways you can apply them. So if you ever run into an issue as to why something's not working, hopefully this will help you troubleshoot as to where or how something was painted.